Can you feel it? The beckoning call of the wild. The kindling in your spirit when you hear the untamed howls of the wilderness. The immolation in your blood as the thrill of the hunt pours over you. Smoldering remains of your enemies lay in waste behind as you conquer and bond with beasts of unwavering loyalty and ferocity. And only whispers dare call your name, as all fear the swift death that falls from your aim, for you are the hunter.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of the Cloak and Quiver podcast. My name is Solar, and thank you guys for tuning in this week. We have a lot to discuss. I want to talk about a few things before we get into our news. Also have 2 discussion topics this week, one regarding hunter utility, and the other one talking about survival. We're going to talk about survival hunters this week as well. And before we get into the show, I just want to thank everybody again for supporting the show. It's been fantastic to be able to do this. We were nominated, the show was, for a podcast spotlight on the Realm Maintenance show. And there's been a vote going on to see who gets the spot, and so far we're in the lead. So I just want to thank everybody for their support in that regard. And I would be really excited to be able to get on Realm Maintenance and just discuss the show and, reach out to even more people. So I just want to say thank you for that. And the first order of business is BlizzCon. I know not everybody who listens to the show is going to be going to BlizzCon, but I certainly will be this year. I went last year as well, and the year prior, at least the BlizzCon prior to that, there was a gap. And I just want to say, for those of you out there that are listening that are planning to go to BlizzCon or are on the fence about going to BlizzCon, first and foremost, it's fantastic to be able to meet with the community in such a large scale. I was blown away by last year's BlizzCon. Just how much the community flourished. I mean, meeting all of the personalities and all the players and everything like that, it was just tremendous. So I'm not going to make any plans now, but I am pretty sure, for those of you that do listen to the show, we are going to have some, hunter meetup. Or a hunter meetup in general, right? It doesn't have to be just the show. But just plan for that. Obviously, we're months away. Tickets go on sale tomorrow as the recording of this show. But I just wanted to mention that, we could have, a Cloak and Quiver get-together, and we can all just be totally awesome hunters, right? And just chill and hang out and talk and stuff like that. We'll pick a time during the con just to meet, and it should be a ton of fun. It really is a ton of fun. And if you guys remember the contest from last week, the transmog contest, just again, if you guys want to design a ranger or archer or kind of woodsman hunter contest, because of the lateness of last week's episode, I am actually going to extend the transmog contest. Just a little bit more about that. You design a transmog set. You can do that on Mogit, or you can take a screenshot of your character and send it into the show's email. And if you win, you can get your choice of Blizzard Store pet. So that's any of the pets you can buy on the Blizzard Store. I'll just gift you the code, and it's yours to keep. So that's pretty awesome. And then also I want to talk about very briefly is the level 85 raid that I mentioned last week, just to do Cataclysm raiding, because right now, Siege of Orgrimmar for me is way boring. So if you go onto my Twitter, you can see the level 85 raid team sign-up page. Right now we have room for 1 tank, 2 healers, and 1 DPS, but the spots have been filling up as the week has gone by. So if that sounds like something you're interested in and you kind of want to just spend some time, it's on Saturday afternoons. It's just 1 day a week for 4 hours. Head on over there. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's just something new to do. And I know it is Cataclysm, which was last expansion, but the first 2 tiers in Cataclysm were amazing. At least in my opinion. So we're looking for a few more people, but with that out of the way, let's get into our news. This week, Watcher, who is the encounter designer for World of Warcraft, he designs the raids primarily. He mentioned a few things about hunters, and there was a very interesting point he said that I want to talk about. And what he said was something along the lines of hunters are not casters. We're not considered a mage or a warlock by any means. We're tuned more like a melee DPS. So in this regard, we talked about this a little bit on episode 3 with Roger Brown, but if there's a fight with no movement, we're not going to do as well. This often can be things like single target, which is really where you just sit and turret the boss, which is minimal movement. Because our strength is being able to perform our full rotation on the move. And if you guys have been watching the news, and as the Warlords of Draenor Alpha and Beta develop, a lot of the classes are being, their abilities that they can cast on the move are being taken away, but hunters have still remained strong. So our strong suit, our ace, so to speak, is being able to DPS on the move. And when you see fights where it's more like single target or just sitting still, hunters are not going to perform as well. At least that's what they were kind of alluding to. And it's impossible to say what things are going to look like when Warlords actually drops, like with tuning and numbers and such. But as it stands right now, hunters are the highest like DPS even on single target. Like the only class that can give us a run for our money are like feral druids and rogues, and I'm talking about like the highest level of play here. Obviously, like in like any other guild outside of like a top 200 or something like that, the meters are probably pretty, they fluctuate, right? But like in my guild, when everyone's just absolutely cutthroat on Iron Juggernaut, I usually finish either like first, second, or third in the raid, and the only people that top that are like feral druids and rogues. So like, even on single target, we're really, really good. So what I imagine this is going to look like, the only scenario that I can possibly think of is on a fight where we have to run from location to location, or like these ads spawn and we have to go DPS them. Just kind of conjure that image up in your head. All of these classes that are in your raid are going to be, penalized for having to move. Like, they're not going to be able to hit most of their abilities, but we are. But the real stickler is, because of that, like, that's where we're going to be getting all of our high DPS, right? Like, that's where we shine. But when it comes to, like, an Iron Juggernaut fight where we just get to sit on the boss, I don't know how they're going to tune our numbers. Like, if we do well on multi-target encounters as well, or just, like, being able to DPS on the move, even if it is a single-target encounter, I don't know how they're going to make our DPS, I don't want to say suffer, but, like, less than those classes that don't get to DPS on the move. You know what I'm saying? So I don't really know how this is going to develop. I want to think that we're still going to be like top 5 single target DPS, which I think is awesome, right? Like we're really good on the move and we can single target. But I don't know how they're going to make it so that like when we're not moving, we're not going to do as much damage like that. I just don't see how that's going to be a thing, because we can still, sit and do our full rotation. We're not like penalized for sitting down like other classes are penalized for moving. You know what I'm saying? So it's weird to me that I don't know how they're going to do this. And what this ultimately comes down to, what the developers are saying is that Hunter DPS is going to be lower when we don't have to move. But countering that, how is that even possible when we don't get a penalization? I keep saying that word. I'm sorry, it sounds weird, but that's the truth of it, right? Like, how is that going to be a thing? So it's going to be really interesting to see. Like, I want my hands on a beta key like right now to see how this thing works, or like when beta does come out, like what's going on here, because is this going to mean that focusing shot becomes a thing now? Like, are we going to need focusing shot? And I did hear that focusing shot is going to have the highest skill cap. Like, in order to be like top DPS, you're going to have to learn how to do focusing shot well. So this may be where, this may be where focusing shot comes into play, and this is how we maintain our competitive nature. So really interesting stuff ahead. Kind of question marks all around, right? Take a look at this. So Cobra Shot does 77% of our weapon damage, and Steady Shot does 66% of our weapon damage, and we can both cast those on the move. Those are our focus generating cast on the move abilities. Now, Focusing Shot is something we have to use to stand still, or we have to stand still to use it, rather, and it does 100% weapon damage, so a noticeable increase. So does that mean that we're going to have to take Focusing Shot to stand still to do the high DPS on the, lower movement encounters? And I think that might be true. Like I said, it's hard to say without WAD dropping, the numbers down, but it looks to be that way. It certainly does, at least in that regard, doing that more damage, but we have to stand still. So kind of interesting, kind of cool, and kind of curious, right? So there is that, and that was kind of an interesting thing that Watcher and Celestalon pointed out this week. Watcher, I believe, on Final Boss, and Celestalon on Twitter. So cool, right? And let's talk a little bit about survival, and all the intricacies and interesting things about the survival spec. So if you guys remember on last week's show, we went into like a lot of intricacies about Beast Mastery and how to maximize your DPS by doing just like very small things. Survival doesn't really have many of those, and I'm not saying like survival is an easier spec to play. I just think it's a lot simpler to understand, and there's a larger margin for error without severe penalty. but there are still things you can do to be a better survival hunter, or at least understand how to play a survival hunter better. It's not like a huge skill cap or anything, and I don't say that like degradingly. It's just not like the hardest hunter spec to understand. It really isn't. And like I said, like, use explosive shot on cooldown. That's only 25 focus, whereas, kill command is 40. You have to really juggle your focus well as BM. With survival, it kind of just, it flows. Survival is very flow. That's a weird word to say. It's like flow based. It's smooth. But there are still a lot of things you can do. Like I said, or at least a couple things you can do to understand just how to play survival better. And one of those things I want to talk about is Serpent Sting and Trinket procs and like multi-target situations. So first of all, Serpent Sting doesn't update dynamically with your Trinket proc. So like say Serpent Sting is on the boss and your Trinket procs, that Serpent Sting is not immediately buffed. You have to either reapply it or refresh it with your Cobra Shot. And if it's something like Ticking Evan Detonator, where like say you have 20,000 agility and you refresh your Serpent Sting with Cobra Shot, and then like you cast Cobra Shot like 10 seconds later, the Ticking Evan Detonator has only like 5,000 agility now. So you're getting a less buffed Cobra Shot. Just keep that in mind. The Serpent Stings update by snapshots, right? You have to reapply them to get the agility benefit at that point. So there is that as well. And what's kind of interesting to mention, and we'll go a little bit more into detail, but I want to explain it now just so you guys can kind of get an idea of how this works, or like the thought process behind this is like, so say Ticking Evan Detonator goes off and you have like a 20,000 agility boost, you'll refresh your Serpent Sting with like a Glaive Toss, or excuse me, a Cobra Shot, and then I try and let that like super buffed Serpent Sting ride for a little bit. So like I'll try, and like so your lock and load is procced, right, and so you're spamming those explosive shots, and then maybe you have Fervor available, so you'll pop Fervor, and then you like Arcane Shot a couple times. You want to keep that buffed Serpent Sting up as long as you can. Don't like super focus starve yourself by doing this, but just try and keep that like I said, ultra buff Serpent Sting up on the boss as long as you can before you have to refresh it with your Cobra Shot at that point, because you don't want to like have a huge agility proc. Like so, say like Assurance of Consequence procs, like an agility boost that does not decrease over time, and like it has like 5 seconds left. So you refresh with Cobra, and if the next Cobra you cast is going to snapshot that proc, you're going to lose all of that agility because Assurance of Consequence is faded off of you at this point. So you want to try and ride that Serpent Sting as long as you can before you do have to refresh with Cobra again. So there is that kind of thing to note. And that's a big thing about survival too, is just understanding when to refresh your Serpent Sting with an agility proc and when not to. And in AoE situations, you can talk a little bit more about that. Like for example, on spoils, I guess you could say, or any fight really, like Garrosh as well, when he has when he's out and all of the melee adds are out too, the guys that like come in from the side gates. Basically, any encounter where you have a primary kill target and a number of secondary adds. You can pad by just like spamming multi-shot and then just like hitting explosive shot on cooldown. Like you could do that, but I like to put out effective damage, right? So like I'll be doing my full rotation on Garrosh because it's important to push his phases as early as we can. And then those adds are just secondary. They're going to die from cleave anyway. So what I really do is I just Serpent Spread every 15 seconds. Because that'll put your Serpent Sting out, for 15 seconds, then you do it again. But say like 7 seconds in, your Trinkets proc, refresh your, Serpent Spread by multi-shotting again, and then just leave that super heavy buffed Serpent Sting on all those adds, because like I said, it's going to be a huge damage increase because your Serpent Sting is going to be taking very heavily now. But you can continue your single target rotation on Garrosh and still maintain a heavy AoE with only, one global, which was your multi-shot. So give that a try. I'm a firm believer in that. You can pad if you want, but it's just like not that effective damage because the ads are going to die anyway. Or like on, spoils where you have the big Mogu or the big Klaxi guy and like all of those like stone guardians that come out from like the large Mogu, like those are just like, BS ads. They're like, they don't mean anything, right? So just, employ that tactic as well. I think it's pretty important. It's not important, but it's just like, it's good DPSing. You're not like wasting damage on just like AoEing a whole bunch to I mean, sure, it's going to raise you on the meters by quite a bit, but is it effective? In my opinion, no. So, just keep that in mind. Now I want to talk about something that's also pretty important, is your talent choice for Dire Beast, Thrill, or Fervor. Dire Beast is garbage for survival. Don't even think about using it. You have a choice between Fervor and Thrill of the Hunt. And Thrill of the Hunt is an overall damage gain. It is the highest yielding DPS talent in the tree. But it saves a lot of focus is what it does. There's a weak aura you can get, I don't know where, just Google like Thrill of the Hunt weak aura, and I think you can find it in the MMO Champion Hunter forums, but it'll track how much focus you saved over the course of the fight, and like when the fight ends and you're like, you saved like, 1,000 focus, you're just like, oh, hey, that was pretty good. I mean, that's focus you can use on using more arcane shots, which in turn is going to make a higher rapid fire uptime with the, the tier bonus that you have for this tier. So Thrill of the Hunt is not bad. But it's, like I said, it's not bad. It is the best in that tree. But there is something to be said about Fervor, and its on-demand focus use, I think, is very good, because you can use it situationally. Like, if there's, like, an ad you have to burn down, like, for example, on Heroic, or not even Heroic, even on Garrosh, this week I was actually on Engineers, because they just needed me on Engineers this week. And what I would do was we'll talk about more about this when we'll get into it a little bit, but I would also save Fervor for when I went to the Engineer, just so I had that extra burst, so I could use those more arcane shots when I was on him. And there's something to be said for being able to do that when you want to. So my advice to you is choose what you feel comfortable with, honestly. Or you can do it on a fight-by-fight basis. Like, if you just want to, like, save a lot of focus, go for Thrill of the Hunt, because you're going to get a lot more arcane shots out. But if you want to, like, be ready to burst something down, or just, like, have on-demand focus with Murder of Crows, which we'll talk about in a second, then Fervor is a super strong choice. So it's a toss-up, really. And we kind of explained the strong points with the two talents, but just keep that in mind, because you can swap back and forth, and they both have their strengths, which I think is what you should take away from that, is they both have their strengths. So let's talk about lock and load now, especially with this tier's 4-piece, with the chance to not consume a proc of the lock and load. You can get some incredible strings of lock and load, and this is great, right? But one thing that you should keep in mind is in Cataclysm, you used to weave arcane shots in between your explosive shots. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember that. You would explosive arcane, because you didn't want those ticks to overlap. Well, now that's not a thing anymore. In Mist, it just gets front loaded to the next one, so it doesn't matter if you spam 7 in a row without delaying them at all. But one thing you need to be careful of is during a lock and load, if you have like a big proc series, if you get to focus cap, don't stay focus capped, because now you're just like wasting a lot of focus that you could otherwise still be generating. And what you do is, like, say you hit 5 explosive shots in a row, and now you're at 100 focus. Bleed it off, hit an arcane shot, and then explosive, and then if you have to do it again, so be it. But do not sit at focus cap during a lock and load. That's very important. And I also want to talk about another thing about lock and load, which I think some survival hunters either don't know about, or they just do not use it. And that is, first let's talk about lock and load. Has a 10-second internal cooldown. You cannot proc lock and load more than 10 seconds apart. And that's an important thing to know when we get into this. But you can use Freezing Trap or Ice Trap to immediately proc your lock and load as well. And this is big, because if you want to, survival does not have on-demand burst like BM does. It doesn't even come close. But this is the sliver of redemption it kind of gets in that, especially with your Ice Trap, because a lot of times in raids things are immune, like bosses are immune to Freezing Trap. You can't Freezing Trap a boss. Are you crazy? You can lay down an Ice Trap, though, on an ad or a boss, and that will proc it. And for example, like I was talking about on the Engineers this week, when we were doing the Engineers, what I would do, because on Heroic it's like an insanely tight HP timer that you have to kill these things. So as a survival hunter, because I can't go BM for that, because my pet does not, it's just a huge pain to have blink strikes. And anyway, so what you do is you save your Black Arrow. You do not cast Black Arrow on Garrosh, and what you do is you go up and you get to the Engineer and you throw your ice trap right where he's going to walk out, and that's going to proc your lock and load, and you can get some heavy, like some attempts I would only get like maybe 3 or 4 arcane or explosive shots out, but like if you get like a heavy streak, you just provided yourself with on-demand heavy burst. And there is a lot to be said for that. That's very important. And I think if you're going to like find a place to, I mean, there's not a whole lot of instances where you're like going to lay an ice trap down to proc your lock and load, as opposed to like waiting for the randomness of Black Arrow. We kind of talked about that with Roger on episode 3. It was just like how RNG is kind of plaguing survival, in my opinion. I just don't like the random nature of how many procs am I going to get, how long is this going to take to proc. That kind of irks me a little bit, but you have to live with it. But this is a way to completely rule out the randomness in it. You just slam that sucker down, that ice trap, and boom, you got your lock and load. But remember the 10-second internal cooldown. You can't just like, Black Arrow and have a proc and then ice trap and then expect to get lock and load again. Like, that's not going to work. So just remember the 10-second ICD rule, and then I mean that's something I feel like a lot of survival hunters could use to their advantage, is to know when to proc their lock and load on demand, because that is like I said, the burst that you want when you want it, and then that coupled with fervor, you can spooky burst right from a survival hunter, like something people don't expect. So that's kind of cool. So carrying on in the talent department a little bit more is Murder of Crows and Blink Strikes. Obviously Link's Rush is just total trash, but this one is kind of interesting. I usually roll Blink Strikes when I play Survival, just because some of the fights that I am playing Survival on, things are moving, and I want my pet to be on those things that are moving, whereas Murder of Crows is going to yield the highest single target DPS increase. And Murder of Crows works great with Fervor, because Murder of Crows is such a high focus cost. You can be prepared with it, with the Fervor. Like, you can hold off on your Fervor for maybe like 5 or 10 seconds, because Murder's going to come up, or even 2025 if you can plan that far ahead, if you remember. And you can just pop Fervor and then Murder, and then like, that was hardly anything. It was 2 globals, and that didn't disrupt your focus at all. Whereas if you did not have Murder of Crows, you'd have to pull up 60 focus to pop that sucker, and I bet you would probably delay a global or 2 in that you should have otherwise be hitting, like an explosive shot or a Black Arrow, because it's just such a heavy cost Murder of Crows is. So I think Murder of Crows and Fervor work together really, really well. And like I said, Murder is still the highest single target DPS increase, but Blink Strikes is not that far off, and it has utility. And it does, like, your pet's going to shoot from target to target, which works out really well when you need it to be on something that's moving or swapping to an ad or what have you. But Murder of Crows is great on Garrosh because of the multiple sub 20% health phases he has. Like, he heals up like 4 times, 5 times on heroic, and like 3 or 4 on normal. If you do your Murder of Crows well, you can pop it on him at a sub 20, and then he'll heal back up to full. But remember, if you use Murder on a target that is sub 20%, its duration goes from a 2-minute cooldown to a 1-minute cooldown. So that's like really cool, something you can do on Garrosh. There's not many other instances where something's going to operate like that. Like maybe Thok, like maybe if you're on Thok and like he heals from like maybe 18% to like 27. I don't know how or when you guys are killing Thok, like, or when you're pushing him into certain phases. Like, you could try it on Thok, but I would imagine that's going to vary from raid team to raid team. But yeah, so that's something kind of cool about Murder that you may or may not have known. But yeah, just keep those 2 in mind. They both have their strengths, again, just like Thrill of the Hunt and just like Fervor. Murder of Crows and Blink Strikes both have their strengths as well. So there is that. And then we can also talk a little bit more about the opening rotation a little bit. I know sometimes people have questions on their openers, and we can go over this just briefly. I don't think it requires a whole lot of explanation, because it's certainly a lot less than the BM opener is. And in this opener, I am going to include Murder of Crows, just assuming that we are on like a single target encounter. And if it's not like single target, or you have Blink Strikes, whatever, just take it out, and it seriously makes no difference. Okay, we're going to apply Hunter's Mark on the boss, and the raid leader gives us our 10-second countdown. At around 1.5 seconds, we're going to hit our pre-pot, and then we're going to cast our Cobra shot. And with that, Cobra is also going to come in auto. And we're going to hope that procs our trinkets early, so we get trinket procs out the gate with all of our cooldowns procced, with potion, with time warp or whatever. I don't like to say heroism or bloodlust, because every time you're like, and heroism, all the alliance or all the horde are like, it's bloodlust, and vice versa. So, and you pop time warp, and so you want those trinket procs for when you pop all of your big cooldowns at the start. So that's why we precast a Cobra to get that ball rolling, and we're going to immediately go into explosive shot. That is our number one priority spell in survival rotation. So it's going to go Hunter's Mark, Cobra, explosive shot, and then black arrow and rapid fire. Now rapid fire is off the global, so we're going to do explosive shot, black arrow, and then we're going to go rapid fire at that, because we want to get our black arrow on the target to start proccing those lock-in loads. Stampede goes out at this time as well, and at this point you are going to have focus for Murder of Crows. You've only done 60 focus worth of casting, right? And with rapid fire and with other haste benefits, you are going to have focus for murder at this point. And then once you do use your Murder of Crows, you're probably going to be empty on focus. So this is where the Fervor comes in. Glaive Toss as well. Apply your Serpent Sting at this point too, because I imagine your trinkets are going to be proc, so this is a really good time to get that Serpent Spread initial tick, as well as just putting it on the target. And I did not mean to say Serpent Spread, I meant improve Serpent Sting, excuse me. And so you put your Serpent Sting up, and then by this point 6 seconds have most likely elapsed, and you're going to hit that explosive shot again. So the opener is rather easy. It's certainly not as complex or has as many nuances as the BM one does, and it's really that simple. So like I said, so it's basically, we'll go over it one more time, kind of in fluidity here. Hunter's Mark, and then the pull timer goes off, and then you precast your Cobra shot. Then you hit explosive, black arrow with the rapid fire. Because remember, rapid fire is off the global. You can do it with your black arrow at the same time. Stampede, Murder of Crows, and then after that you're going to be low on focus, so you're going to hit your Fervor, and then you Glaive Toss, Serpent Sting, and then by this time your explosive shot's ready to go again. So like I said, it's only what was that? Maybe 7, 8 casts off, and then you're done with your opener, and then you just flows into your normal rotation. And your normal rotation is just mad easy, right? Have focus for black arrow, have focus for explosive shot, have focus for Glaive Toss. Woo! Not too bad. So that's the opener for survival. Let's talk a little bit about AoE, and not like we talked about earlier, but these targets need to die, and there are many of them. We need to AoE, and the survival AoE is pretty cool. It's pretty easy too. Cast multi-shot as many times as you can. Definitely place those explosive traps down if they're going to stay there. Remember, we talked about that last episode too, is make sure that they're actually going to stay in your explosive trap. And then you're also going to use black arrow in these. The only reason being is because you still want to get those explosive shots out. But don't explosive shot unless you have lock and load proc, and that is why we're using that black arrow in the AoE pack even. And then you basically just spam multi-shot, and then if your lock and load procs goes off, you use your 3, 4, or whatever explosives, and then you just Cobra, and multi-shot. So it's basically just multi-shot if you can. When you have lock and load, you dump the explosive shots onto the target you want to hit, harder, and then you just Cobra and you do it again. And to tell you the truth, I really think that does it for survival. There's not much else to talk about. Maybe we could go into trinkets a little bit, and perhaps maybe some stat priorities, although you can find these online. I suppose it's still useful to talk about. So for survival, you're going to look for a crit haste mastery build. This is quite opposite to the BM, or just not the same. So remember that, if you're going to switch between the two specs, they're not. If you're going for a haste build for BM, you're not going to be reforged properly for both specs. It's either one or the other. And so crit haste mastery is what you want for survival. And then trinkets, I get asked this question a lot, what trinkets should I be using for survival? So the two toss-ups, of course you want Assurance of Consequence, that's the cooldown reduction trinket, but Harems or a Ticking Edmund Detonator, that's the big one. So here's the deal. Harems procs, as a survival hunter, 70% of your damage is through you, and 30% is your pet. So Harems is going to be having a 70% chance to proc all of your damage dealing abilities into its multi-strike, which is going to in turn deal more damage. Whereas if you were a BM hunter, only 45 to 50% of the damage is through you. So Harems is only having a 45 to 50% chance to have its multi-strike proc. So that is also why survival is going to favor Harems way more than taking Edmund Detonator. If you're a survival hunter, try and get your hands on a Harems talisman. It's okay if you have the Taking Edmund Detonator. It's kind of nice to have those stats to play around with it, with the secondary stats, but Harms is superior by a long shot. Just for that reason alone. So it's get your hands on a Harms. And then so the Reforge is crit haste mastery, and for trinkets you're gonna want to find a Harms talisman. But that really does it. I mean, survival is fun to play because I feel like it flows quite well. Like it's very fluid, but it's not like too hard either. Like everything we discuss in this episode is seriously like all you need to know about how to play survival hunter. But yeah, so that's kind of interesting. I wish there was more to talk about, but at least I don't feel like there is. With that being said, don't feel like I'm not neglecting survival. It's just I honestly think that like that is all there is to talk about. So I want to take this time to probably wrap up the show a little bit. There's something that is long overdue, in my opinion, and I just kind of found them today because I went back to the social media sites where we have hosted Cloak and Quiver, and I just want to say a huge thank you to those that have given the show a 5-star review, and I do want to kind of shout your name out. So on iTunes is ZiggyWink429, Willpower81, and Jeremy Castor, and they both gave, all three of them, they gave a very nice review, which was great to read, which obviously put a smile on my face because they were very nice. And then also on Stitcher we have Ranger Fan, who also gave a very nice review, and I really appreciate the kind words, guys, and I'm sorry it's been so long that I didn't give you a shout out, but supporting the show is great, so thank you. And I think that's going to do it for this week's show. If you guys have a question or a discussion topic, send them into the Cloak and Quiver email. There's been a lot of emails that I've just been answering as a direct reply back. Like they have a lot of like really good questions, but I don't know if it would like make for a show. But I do want to mention like next week's episode, we're probably not going to go over Marksman just because of how much of a train wreck I honestly think that spec is right now. It's going to be a lot better in Warlords, and maybe we'll talk about it then. Well, actually, of course we will. But right now, it's just a travesty. So next show, I want to do a lot of question and answer. So if you have, like, seriously any questions you want answered about being a hunter or anything like that, seriously, every question that I get this week in an email is going to go into the show as a discussion topic for next week's episode, which I think is what we're going to do, is kind of like a round table with only one person, but you guys are there just in spirit with all of your questions, so send them all in to cloakandquiver@gmail.com. If you want to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at Cloak and Quiver. If you want to follow me on Twitter, that's for like everything hunter related and Warcraft related. I'm at _solarflare. That's FLAIR. And one thing before we go, I do have the show on an RSS feed, and that RSS feed is what uploads the show to iTunes and Stitcher. I have no idea what Stitcher is doing with my episode 3. I've updated the show on Stitcher like 7 times in the past 3 days, and it's just not putting up the Roger Brown interview. If you guys use Stitcher and you want to listen to the interview with Roger Brown on YouTube or iTunes, it's there for some reason. iTunes was okay with it, but Stitcher was like, nuh-uh. I guess they just don't like Greeks. So I'm sorry for that. But I think that's going to wrap up this week's show. Thank you, everybody, for listening. It was a little short, but I honestly feel like we covered all the information we needed to. And then next week's show is all just going to be discussion topics from you guys. So please send those questions in. I am more than happy to hear from you. You can even recycle a question if you want to hear it on the air. And we can probably talk a little bit more in depth. But I just want to thank everyone who's been emailing me too, because you guys are just so, interested in learning more, and so grateful too when you get, a response back. And it's just, that's the reason why I did this show, to give back, and it makes me feel great that I can do that for you guys. So thank you. A big thank you. So I think that's going to do it for episode 5. I'll see you guys for episode 6 with our discussion topics. Don't forget about the contest this week. You have one more week to get those transmog submissions in. If you want to do some level 85 raiding with me and the Convert to Raid crew, you can do so on my Twitter page. It's like the first tweet on there to sign up. And then I think I'll see you guys for next week's show. Everybody have a great rest of the week, and I will see you next time. And I will see you next time. And I will see you next time. And I will see you next time.